Hello GeoGeeks and welcome. This is the first video in a series of what will probably be many videos on dealing with and installing the Cygwin Linux-like environment for the Windows operating system. And in this GeoGeeks personal opinion, I think if you're going to be a GeoGeek, you need to have access to a Linux-type terminal window environment, whether that's through actually running Linux or through doing what we're going to cover in Cygwin, or if you're on an Apple or a Macintosh computer, your computer already comes built in with a Unix terminal in your utilities folder. I'm not going to cover any of that stuff because this particular GeoGeek prefers to build his own computers, and so my machines are all Windows or Linux based. So in these series of videos, I'm going to cover how to install Cygwin. But before we do that, you're probably asking the question, what is Cygwin? And why are we doing this? So Cygwin, you can see this is the homepage. It's cygwin.com. And you're probably noticing that my font is gigantic. And that is because I've scaled the fonts by 200%, just because I figured everybody watching this video, most people aren't going to be watching this on a huge computer screen, and you're going to want to be able to actually read the text. So 200% font scaling, that's why everything's so big. Okay, so Cygwin, it says right here, get that Linux feeling on Windows. It's a collection of open source tools that provide something similar to a Linux distribution on Windows. It's not a virtual machine. It's not even technically emulating Linux. It's actually a compatibility layer through a series of DLL files. But for most intents and purposes, you can consider it like an emulator. The other alternative on Windows that's mainstream is using what's called the Windows subsystem for Linux, and I just typed it into Google here so you could see. This is referred to as WSL, Windows Subsystem for Linux. Now, WSL is actually quite cool. So don't think because I'm a Cygwin user that I think WSL is not cool. I think it's amazing. What WSL does is it actually installs a virtual machine with a full real Linux distribution inside of it, running on top of your Windows computer, which is really cool. So there are instructions, that's the first link there, and documentation about how you install this and how you use it. It's really neat. The benefit is that it's very fast. It's almost as fast as natively running Linux, whereas Cygwin has to be all interpreted through this DLL file. So there's a little bit of a performance penalty there. But for most, data analysis stuff, it's not a big deal. I wouldn't run giant numerical models on Cygwin, but there's even really nice instructions on how to install WSL. It's really easy in the PowerShell command. You can even choose which distribution of Linux you want. For me, the deal breaker is that WSL installs itself in its own sort of separate directory tree from the rest of Windows. You can access it from Windows, but if you read the documentation, what it'll tell you is that really, if you're using WSL, all of your Linux stuff should be done in the WSL portion of the directory tree, and all of your Windows stuff should be done in the Windows portion of the directory tree. And for me, that's the big deal killer. Because what I often like to do is process some data with scripts and stuff that are written as like shell scripts, and then dump all the data out to a file, maybe make a graph of it, and then when I'm done, open that graph in Illustrator and maybe edit it or something. And that's where WSL is the deal killer for me. I want to be doing Windows stuff and Linux stuff all in the same place. So that's a deal breaker for me. Your mileage may vary. WSL is really cool. So if you're new to it, if you already have it, give it a chance. But the topic of this video is Cygwin. So how do you install Cygwin? Well, if you scroll down, the setup x86_64.exe file is right here. You can see at the beginning I'd already downloaded it. So let's download it real quick. You're only seeing one of my two screens, so let me drag it over here. There it is. So all I gotta do is double click on it. Just like a normal Windows program, the screen goes black because it's giving you that security warning like you always get when you install programs. Now this setup program is sort of weird because it's simultaneously very easy and quite tricky. So let's go over this in detail. Yes, you want to install from the internet. This directory you should not mess with this unless you're not an administrator on your computer, because you won't have access to this directory. If you're not an administrator, you might have to pick some other directory, but otherwise, I think you should leave it alone. Leave it where it is. The local package directory, this is sort of like all the temporary install files and source code that are needed to build Cygwin. So I'm just going to put this on my desktop. That way when I'm done, I can find it easily and delete it. I don't need a proxy server. You probably won't either. Cygwin's files are vast. There can be gigabytes and gigabytes of files when you download. You'll see in a minute. So Cygwin itself doesn't actually host these files. It posts them all on mirror sites that the data gets copied over every time there's a new release. So it doesn't matter which one you use as long as you find one that's fast. So I've had good luck with X-Mission. I've also had good luck with Georgia Tech and the Virginia Tech ones because those are near where I live. So you typically want to pick one that's close to you. But I'm going to pick X-Mission. And once you click this, it should download stuff. And then you'll see your installer will pop up, but it'll also make this little directory on your desktop that has mirror xmission.com and a bunch of % signs and all that stuff. So let's go back to the installer. By default, it's going to go to category. You can also pick full, pending, up to date. So you can view this in different ways, but for installing the first time, category is probably the best. Now, in the old days, I used to actually install everything. But one day I looked at my Cygwin installation and realized it was like 90 gigabytes. And I said, holy cow, there's no way I need all this stuff. So what I'm going to cover in this video is what I install. I'm not advocating that this is the best stuff to install, but my basic sort of style is I'd rather have more than I need than not enough, because installing stuff in Cygwin is kind of a pain. Like if you're used to Linux, there's like the apt command. You can just type sudo apt install and get something. Cygwin, you have to do it through this package manager. So it's kind of a pain. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell Cygwin to install everything. And then it's going to say, yeah, you got to have some stuff, whatever, who cares? And then I'm going to go through by hand and click uninstall on the stuff that I don't need. Again, there's probably better ways to do this, but this is just what I've found that works. So accessibility I want. Archive, audio is the first one I don't need. I don't need a bunch of audio libraries. As I'm recording this, you're probably thinking, maybe he does need to work on his audio skills. Anyway, so I've uninstalled those. And again, I'm not saying this, you might want those things. Base, you definitely want. Database, yes. Debug. Debug is the monster. There's 2,158 different packages in the debug libraries. And I think it's unlikely that you will use these unless you go away from earth and environmental and geological sciences into more software engineering. So I'm going to hit uninstall because the debug libraries are tens of gigabytes of stuff and I've never needed them. We definitely want development. We don't need the documentation, surprisingly. Editors, we definitely want all of our editors. We don't need games. Games are fun, but this channel is about data analysis and general geogeekery, not games. GNOME is a desktop environment that is essential on Linux, but since we're already running Windows, we don't need a desktop environment, so I can uninstall that. I do want graphics. I want all my interpreters. KDE is another desktop environment that we don't need. We definitely want all the libraries. We don't need Lua and LXDE. I have to admit, a lot of these things I had to look up what they actually were before deciding if I needed them or not. I don't need any mail utilities. I don't need mate. There's some cool stuff in math, like R, for example, is in there, and Octave, which is pretty cool. It's like the open source version of MATLAB. I don't think we're going to use it on this channel, but let's get it just in case. We don't need OCaml. Scroll down. We don't need Office. There are some free Office tools. It'll install the Calligra Office package, which is pretty cool, but you know, I'm at a university and we have Microsoft Office, so I'm just gonna not deal with that in Cygwin. Perl we definitely want. PHP maybe. Publishing. Oh, here people are gonna be mad at me. If you are a big user of LaTeX, you will probably want the publishing library, but I'm not. My GeoGeekery is not complete, so I don't need that. And the post-install scripts for LaTeX take forever, so I'm going to not install it. Python we definitely want. Ruby's cool. Scheme we don't need. It's only one package too. In case you're wondering why I'm stalling here, I have a list over here, and I'm trying to make sure I don't forget any of them. We don't want science. There's some cool science libraries in there. Security shells. Sugar we don't need. We don't even need sugar in our diets, let alone in our Cygwin. Thank you, bad joke. TCL I don't need. Definitely one of the text utilities. There's a really important utility in here called DOS to Unix that we're going to use a lot. You probably thought plain text was text. Nope, they're different. Utility. There's a whole bunch of unmaintained stuff. I'm hoping what we need is not an unmaintained, or else we'll go back and install it. We don't need video and virtual. There are some cool web tools in there, like wget and stuff like that we might use. X11's for graphical applications. Let's grab that. XFCE is a lightweight desktop manager. We don't need that either. So I think that's it. Again, this isn't like, you're not committed to this fully forever. You can always go back and add these packages if you need them later. Now it's going to resolve dependencies. Some of these packages that I've installed require things that I've told not to install, so it'll just automatically fix those. Here's everything that's going to be installed. It is a lot of stuff. So let's just hit next. Okay, now be prepared. This is going to take a while, but your internet connection speed is critical. Right now, mine is actually not doing super great. Okay, it's getting faster. You really want to be going at least several megabytes per second, and if better, even better if you can start going more than 10 or 20 megabytes per second. That'd be, it gives it in kilobytes per second, so you'd want to be at 10,000 or more ideally. Looks like mine's not super great tonight. Oh, there we go. Yeah, they were just small files. And again, the small files will download slower than large files. That's a typical thing that you'll find on computers. So you can see my total is very small. So this is going to go through a downloading process. When the downloads are done, it's going to then switch to an installing process. And then when the installing is done, it's going to switch to a post-install script section. And all this will just go automatically, but just be prepared that this could take many hours, depending on how fast your computer is and your internet connection is, okay? So what I'm going to do is, I'm not going to make you sit through this. That would be painful. What I will do is pause the video, and I will come back when we get to the installing section and sort of show you what's going on, and then I'll come back when we get to the final sections. So hold on to your seats. It'll probably be just a second when I come back. Bye-bye. And we're back. You can see now that we're at the installing stage, and you see that many of these packages will install quite quickly, although you see the total is still at 0. Oh, now we're at 3%, yay. So this will take, I don't know, 5, 10, 15 minutes, something like that. But again, after this, you will come to the post-install script phase. Words are hard, yes. And those will look like they're doing nothing. So I'll come back when we get there, and I'll see you then. Bye-bye. Okay, so we're back, and you can see that we're now at the final stage where we're running through a whole bunch of post-install scripts. Some of them, now here's the important thing, is some of these are going to look like they're doing nothing. They're going to look like it's hanging and it's crashed, and you're going to be tempted to, kill the install or restart your system or something. Just let it run. I've had a couple of computers that these Cygwin post-install scripts will take hours and hours and hours. I think one computer I had to actually leave it overnight. That was a long time ago though. But the point is, just leave this thing running until you get to the final end, and you will have an error on the exit code, and I'll pop back in when that happens. But don't worry about it, it's normal, and I'll come back and talk to you again when we get to the very end, and we'll talk about what the final steps are. See you then. Okay, we're back, and it looks like Cygwin has finished. This exit code 1 post-install script error thing, I always get it. It's not a big deal, don't worry about it. Go ahead and hit next. It'll ask if you want to put stuff on your start menu on your desktop. I'm going to go ahead and say yeah. The start menu shortcuts are particularly useful, I think. So what you get on your desktop is this thing right here. That's a Cygwin 64 terminal. So if you double click on it, it will hang for a minute because my computer thinks it's on a domain, but it's not. And what it will do is it will open up your terminal window, and it will also create all of your default setup files that have all your environment variables and your sort of user settings. So the one that we're going to cover, these .bashrc and the bash_profile file in a future video. And we'll also discuss how to make this terminal window look different, because right now it's pretty small. I mean, you know, I have my font scaled 200% and this is still a pretty small window. So stay tuned in a future video for how to do that. We'll even talk about how to customize your prompt, which is pretty cool. All right, I hope you found this video useful. If so, if you have any suggestions or comments, feel free to comment below, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.